Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a special edition from the Illicit Edge Media Network in collaboration with TRM Labs. We're coming to you today with something that is unscripted. Before we get into it, just to let you know, I'm Yaya J Fanusie. I am the Director of Policy for Anti-Money Laundering and Cyber Risk at the Crypto Council for Innovation. And I'm also a host of the Illicit Edge's a designated show here on the Illicit Edge Network. And today I'm really happy to bring on a great guy, someone who everyone loves. Everyone loves Ari. Ari, Ari Redbord, welcome to the show, Global Head of Policy and Government Affairs at TRM Labs, a friend, someone who I love talking to. Welcome, Ari.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and thank you for the kind introduction. I'm not sure that's true. I hope so. At least I hope you love me. But no, really excited for the conversation today, and just love this idea of being unscripted, of talking about some cool stuff, in addition to AI crime, and really looking forward to the conversation today. Thanks for having me.
Yes, so we're doing something different today. So we have the focus is from Hollywood to reality, AI, financial crime, and what's coming next. And what we're going to do is, as Ari, as you said, this is an unscripted stream, unscripted. This is not anything that we really prepared. It's going to be a very open conversation reflecting on the things that we're following and tracking professionally around AI, around financial crime, but also the idea of looking at how culture reflects and how these things are reflected in culture. So we've picked a couple of movies, one movie in particular that we're going to get into, but a little bit of housekeeping before we get into it. Just want to let everyone know this is going to be an interactive discussion. We're going to get into some live Q&A towards the end or towards maybe the middle of our conversation for this hour. So you're in this chat now, so you can actually later on when we open it up for questions, you can ask a question. I just want to let people know your name will appear as you have it on your profile. So if for some reason you want to change your name, which you don't need to, we're all friends here. But just want to give everyone a heads up there. And just to start this conversation off, we're going to talk about these issues, but I just want to give a little sort of a preamble. Ari, you and I were talking about movies, and how movies have impacted us, and we're gonna talk about Minority Report. But I wondered if we could even just before we get into things, I know some people are still hopping on. Movies. How have movies impacted you professionally?
No, I love the question, and hopefully folks appreciate the fact that it is a hot summer day, but I'm doing my best Tom Cruise in Minority Report with my black t-shirt and my leather jacket. But I loved it. Like you and I really started talking a couple months ago about like, what could we do that's really different? And I think you and I both love movies, and we both love pop culture. And this idea that movies really for the last 25 years has been talking about, AI crime in ways that we're really just starting to talk about it today from a policy perspective is pretty extraordinary. And I think even before we jumped on here, you and I were literally going through the library of Spielberg movies and how they've affected our life. We realized that we're exactly the same age. And as Gen Xers have really been, much of how we think about the world has been informed by growing up watching Steven Spielberg movies. But really, I find myself talking about AI crime more and more. I testified before Congress a week or so ago on the issue. But this idea of pre-crime, predictive policing, Minority Report comes up more than you would think. I mean, even just citing the movie is pretty extraordinary. I think things are very, very different than they are in that film. But the reality is the fact that they were talking about these issues 25 years ago is just extraordinary and informs so much of the conversation today.
Well, Ari, you mentioned Gen X. We're Gen Xers. When we were talking before, we were talking about the lives of Gen Xers, how we have been raised on Spielberg movies. So we're going to get into Minority Report, but I even want to sort of emphasize that the key to our Gen X childhood and teenagehood was Tom Cruise, right? Tom Cruise, when we see him, that's someone who we grew up with. And so before we get into Minority Report, we were just thinking about, well, what has Tom Cruise done most recently? That's the Mission Impossible movies. So why don't we actually, I want to kick it off first with just maybe a look at Mission Impossible, the latest Mission Impossible installment. So if we could actually run a quick trailer, and then we'll get the conversation started. So let's.
This can't all be true.
Every word.
CIA Black Vault break-in.
Am I reading this correctly? The Kremlin bombing?
In fairness, the bomb was actually meant to kill him.
He gassed a security briefing.
That was just 2 months ago.
This explains the handcuffs. It's still not clear why he's here.
If we want to bring the world back from the brink, we have to deal with him.
Should he choose to accept?
Smart people on every side are close to panicking.
What exactly is your plan? Your team has been betrayed, Ethan. All your secrets compromised.
Everything you are, everything you've done, has come to this.
You gave him an aircraft carrier? Our lives are the sum of our choices. This is your calling, your destiny. I have no regrets. Neither should you.
I need you to trust me. One last time.
Ari, do you choose to accept this mission?
I do. And I think one of the things that's really so crazy about this is there's a lot of activity, there's a lot of characters, there's a lot of actors in there. But what you are really seeing is the villain in this Dead Reckoning and then this Final Reckoning movie is a AI agent that they call the Entity. And one of the first things you see in that trailer is essentially the Entity is causing a Russian submarine to essentially attack itself. It convinces this submarine through the autonomous action of an AI agent that it's under attack, and the sub ends up firing torpedoes on itself. It's one of the first things you see there in the trailer.
Okay.
The entire
It's not a spoiler.
yeah, not at all. It's one of the first things you see in the trailer.
Yeah.
The entire crew is killed, and the vessel, essentially sinks to the bottom of the sea. And it speaks to questions of, hey, today AI is driven by human interaction, right? We're prompting AI to do certain things. But there is a future state where AI is acting autonomously. And from a crime perspective, it's very interesting if you are a criminal element in network and can ultimately use or deploy AI in this autonomous way. And there's a lot of questions about that.
Well, Ari, I wonder though if we should think about art imitating reality. Like, what is imitating what? Because this movie comes out, but I would actually say that this premise. So this premise in Mission Impossible. Again, we're not going to no major spoilers here, but the movie just came out a few months ago. The premise is that AI is the villain. That this villainous AI, right, intends to do humanity harm. And actually, a little side note, because as I was thinking about the movie and thinking about our childhood, the premise in this movie, that the stuff about the nuclear, here's a little bit of trivia. Maybe people in the audience will get this. It reminded me of a movie from the 80s where there is a computer that may annihilate the world and do nuclear Armageddon, and it's from
Yeah,
the early 80s.
this should have been
Do you know what movie?
absolute war games, and this should totally. Maybe we should have done war games today, but we should definitely. Oh, it's awesome! I see some war games in the chat here. Joe, it's on there. Nice. But yeah, war games. Maybe that's another really good one. But yeah, it is. It's when machines essentially sort of take over. These types of activities. I think, and that's something that's always been a theme, and I think we're just seeing it play out more and more in the real world today. I think one thing that's really, really important when we talk about AI and AI crime in particular is that cyber criminals are and others are using this technology, but it's just technology. And while we see AI being used to scale fraud operations, we see it being used to scale ransomware, hacks, cyber attacks. We're also seeing it used to combat that type of activity. And that's what we're thinking about 24/7 right now at TRM is how can we build tools for law enforcement and national security agencies that really leverage AI, that integrate AI in order to combat cyber actors. So really important, I know that the entity and is the bad guy in this film, but the reality is that bad actors are going to use technology like cryptocurrency. One point real quick is in my congressional testimony from a couple of weeks ago, I made the point really upfront is that one thing that in my time as there he is,
Mr. Redbord.
exactly,
Thank you.
yeah, that's the other version of me, not the leather jacket version. One point I really wanted to make up front was that one thing I learned from my time at the Treasury Department and my time at the Department of Justice for many years is that criminals are always early adopters of transformative technology. One thing I always point to is literally the FBI was created the same year the Model T rolled off the assembly line because we realized that bad actors, criminals, were now going to be able to move across state lines at unprecedented speed and scale, right? Crime was always local until automobiles, right? Until the proliferation of automobiles. And that's why we needed a federal police force. The same thing could be said of pagers and cell phones, end-to-end encrypted messaging apps, cryptocurrency, where we can now move value cross-border at the speed of the internet. These are all transformative technologies that have been primarily used for good. AI is in that same camp. It's also being used today by bad actors, and we need to counter that.
So let's double click a little bit on that, how bad actors are using it. So I mean, Ari, you're on the front lines in a lot of ways in terms of looking at illicit actors, how they're using technology, financial technology, crypto. So what are some of the, what are you seeing? So what are real use cases, the bad use cases of AI being used to advance financial crime?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a whole host of categories. And the way I think about AI in particular and used in crime is it supercharges criminal activity, right? Criminals can now move faster and at scale than ever before. It removes the human bottleneck, right? We've always said like you can only move fast as individuals or humans can move. Now the bottleneck is only computational power, right? How we can leverage technology to move quickly. So I think that across these different threats, the AI supercharges criminal activity. One place that we're really, really seeing it today is in fraud and scams, particularly around the use of deepfake technology. I did a TRM talks a couple months ago with a gentleman named Hani Farid, who's one of the foremost experts from UC Berkeley and a founder of a startup called Get Real Labs that does deepfake technology. And it's just really extraordinary in terms of how good deepfakes have become when it comes to video, when it comes to audio, and it really is able to supercharge scam activity. According to Chain Abuse, which is our scam reporting website, we saw about a 450% increase over the last year in AI used in crypto-related scam activity. In other words, think Elon Musk fake videos raising funds in crypto or giving crypto investing advice. I even saw him put out a tweet in the last week or so that said, "Hey, I don't support any specific crypto projects. If you're seeing something like this, it's not me." So we've seen a huge, phishing attacks are becoming more tailored, more directed.
Yeah.
This is not the world of broken English and emails anymore. These are very sophisticated, very tailored, and sometimes use video. So I think scam activity is one major place. Getting more like Mission Impossible-y, we're seeing ransomware actors,
Mhm.
supercharging operations, right? You don't need human affiliates anymore. When you can have AI agentic affiliates who can launch cyber attacks.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
you
I mean,
you
but walk us through that. I mean, so I
Sure.
mean, 'cause there's a lot there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
AI agentics, AI agents launching a cyber attack. What does that look like? And then I'm thinking about how it can be countered.
It's pretty extraordinary, right? Like, so this whole idea has been ransomware as a service is an industry that we've seen really proliferate over, say, the last decade or so, where basically you have these ransomware groups that are providing kits on darknet markets. How do you do a malware attack, right? And they take a percentage of that attack. Think of it as McDonald's for cyber crime. You become essentially an affiliate
Oh, like
or
a,
a
a
franchisee
franchise.
a
Yeah.
franchisee of one
Hmm.
of these larger ransomware actors. Think Lockbit or one of these guys, right? But you've always needed to build that group of franchisees. You need
Hmm.
people who are buying into this in order to do these attacks. These ransomware groups don't need that anymore necessarily. You build AI agents that can essentially act as those affiliates, and you take all of the proceeds from these attacks because you could supercharge them. You could do more attacks. You can do them faster than ever before. So that's one example is ransomware, but cyber attacks very similar, right? Like you can do cyber attacks faster than ever before. You don't need to rely on that constant sort of
Yeah.
human phishing, human malware deployment. You can do this just essentially building AI agents. So you have this whole piece, but then you talk about countering it. You're also building tools to process data more quickly,
Hmm.
to find these attacks, to find the bugs that allow them to breach your defenses. You also using AI.
Yeah. Well, can we zoom out though?
Absolutely.
Because one thing I know you're prominent on LinkedIn. You're a LinkedIn guy. You get your daily dose of
I like LinkedIn.
where where in the world is Ari?
And I apologize for all of you to all of you.
No, I mean it's hey when it pops up, I'm like, oh gosh, what can I learn from Ari today? Um, but actually, let me put something out there though, because there's some controversy. So something that's impacting us, our work, our professional work, is the fact that there's legislation in crypto. The Genius Act has been passed. We're clearly seeing something we hadn't seen for 7-8 years before, which is actual legislation getting passed. It's good that's impacting the crypto ecosystem. There are some voices out there that are very concerned. Everyone doesn't love crypto, right? Everyone might love Ari. Everyone doesn't love crypto. There are people out there who are, pointing to, wow, what does this mean? The Genius Act has passed. All of these problems are going to proliferate. These are their words, the words of some skeptics and just some critics who are concerned. What do you think this new era is going to be, where now we're moving towards market structure? We're moving to an environment where the digital asset system is more formally part of our lives. What are the challenges there, and how do we answer some of those issues?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think the reality is we are seeing the crypto ecosystem grow. We're seeing rules and regulation put around it. You and I are very focused on illicit finance, on anti-money laundering, and there are significant provisions within the Genius Act to require stablecoin issuers that have U.S. Activity, U.S.
Mhm.
users, to have robust AML controls in place. And I think that's going to be a really, really important piece of protecting the ecosystem. What we've always heard, and we work with all the major stablecoin issuers, we have always heard that, hey, what we need from Congress is essentially rules of the road. We need to know how to act. We need to, you talk about speed limits. We need to know how fast to drive. And I think that that's what we're seeing with Genius and eventually market structure. So I actually think
Yeah.
that we're building the safety and security layer by having regulation in place that's going to
Mhm.
provide compliance teams some direction. Moyara in the chat,
Yeah, I
who
see
is a
that.
stalwart in this space, and I
Yeah.
wouldn't even go a second without trying to answer her question. But
Mhm.
in the congressional testimony, which is on our website, I really try to go deep here. And I know she's way deeper than my, 1-minute answer will be. But really kind of to my last points, we're seeing fraudsters and scammers really, really leverage AI right now I'd say the real key is to create much more targeted outreach. They know a lot more about you when they reach out. I mean, the scariest stuff we're seeing is, when a mother's voice or a child's voice is simulated in a deep fake on a call. Hey, I'm having an emergency. Can you send funds here? Right. And I think what this ultimately is going to require is that we almost change our mindset. Like, it's something we've even talked a little bit to our boys about. And that is like, we should implement, like I did when I was a kid. You talk about Gen X, right? There were issues around kidnapping and all kinds of things that we were dealing with as kids. I remember getting fingerprinted in my school gym. My family had a password. Anyone who was going to pick you up from school that you didn't know was going to have a family password. I was
stranger danger.
Stranger danger. I think that, like, if you're getting outreach from someone in your family, they need to know you should have some type of code word. So I think that, like, from an individual basis, we just need to be a lot smarter and sadly not believe things that even a few years ago were very obvious to us. Moyara's question is around compliance. And I think the reality is that, like, compliance professionals need tools and they need training around whether it's blockchain intelligence from a crypto perspective, but also these types of deepfake technology tools. Law enforcement, right? Today, there's a cadre of law enforcement agents in the US and then globally that really, really have deep knowledge on crypto tracing, on AI, and we're going to need to much build out that capacity. And that means tools, that means training. So I think it's really full spectrum, but we're moving to a world where crime is occurring on blockchains and in cyberspace in ways that was committed just on city streets before. And law enforcement needs those tools to combat this new era of crime.
And to Moyara's point about the future, really, right? What she's pointing to, I mean, in the Genius Act, there is a provision. I mean, it's law now. The law actually has a requirement for standards for the U.S. to develop, for FinCEN to put out rulemaking around standards for detecting illicit activity involving digital assets. There's really a whole section there. It's the section on anti-money laundering innovation. And so I think what you're getting at, Ari, is that there's going to be there's going to be a need for ramping up, for building more robust detection, AI-enabled detection, right? So that really we know financial crime is always a cat and mouse game, right? So we're in the middle of that, and or I should say we're at the beginning of it. Before we get into kind of, how do we respond and how are people responding, before we get into our next movie, I got to give a shout out to Joe McNamara because not only did he get War Games, but he got Whopper. So he's putting Whopper. It's not a reference to Burger King, but the war, I think it was the War Games, the War Operations Plan Response. That was the character. That was the AI in the movie War Games. So Joe has obviously seen that movie. Great Matthew Broderick classic. So just want to acknowledge Joe.
Next time we're gonna have to do War Games. I remember, and I as I sit here right now, I know this is unscripted, so I wish I did a little research. But I remember Ronald Reagan actually had a great comment after that movie came out about this is definitely real and something that we're thinking all the time about, when they were thinking about, national security related issues.
And that's why I would say, where does art imitate reality and vice versa, right? Because there's definitely a mix. Again, coming from our generation where it was War Games, it was also Skynet, right? Skynet also as an artificial intelligence and the bad consequences, and even the Matrix, right? Part of the plot of the Matrix, right, was that disaster was enabled by AI, right? So this is the fiction. Now, obviously, part of what happens in the human imagination is also, the good side. Now, how do humans respond? How do we use technology to our advantage. And Ari, I think you've pointed out a few things, already. But I think this is where we can think about what are the tools and how do we imagine using technology to fight financial crime. And this is where we need to talk about Minority Report, even though some people are going to be like, what's the connection with Minority Report?
I'm so excited. Kelly and I watched it last night.
Yeah.
And I am super psyched to talk Minority Report today.
Okay. So why don't we do this? Why don't we, since it's been a while, this was 2002. So let's drop the trailer for Minority Report, and then we'll come back and let's just geek out on what this means.
Let's go.
Look at me. Positive for Howard Marks. I'm placing you under arrest for the future murder of Sarah Marks and Donald Dubin that was take place today, April 22nd, at 0800 hours and 4 minutes. No.
John, don't run.
Everybody runs, Fletch.
Everybody runs.
Everybody runs. I run, as everybody knows.
Tom Cruise runs.
Tom Cruise runs. Look, I watched it last night, so it's really, really fresh in my mind. Just like a couple really quick thoughts before we dive in. One thing, even beyond sort of the AI policing piece, the predictive crime, which I'm not exactly sure that's where we're headed, is there were so many other little really cool pieces to this, right? You were seeing newspapers update in real time on the metro in DC, where people were reading their newspaper, right? I mean, that's very prescient for the age of social media and this constant sort of real time. You'd walk into a store, the Gap was an example, and the ads would be playing there that were for you as an individual, right? Exactly the thing we're seeing on social media today. So it's not just sort of like this idea of predictive policing or AI, but there was really so much more in this film that was really prescient for what's going on today in the world.
Yeah, and so and maybe since it has been a long time, I should kind of break down the premise, right? So Tom Cruise is there. He's the head of the pre-crime unit. This is a DC-based unit. And what they do is they disrupt murders before they happen. How do they do that? There is a system of what is called precog. So there are 3 humans who have psychic abilities, and these individuals are able to predict when a murder is going to happen. So once that report comes out, then the pre-crime unit springs into action, and they go, and hopefully sometimes seconds before the murder is going to occur, they stop it. So I mean, obviously it's fictional. Obviously it raises a whole bunch of legal questions, social questions, and I think the movie deals with that very, very frankly, right? Constitutional questions. I mean, it's really a thought-provoking film. But one thing that I think that resonates with me, yes, it's science fiction, even though there are parallels like you mentioned, but it points to the desire for us to get ahead of threats. Now, obviously, we don't want to get ahead of threats in the way that the pre-crime unit does. But in our everyday reality, we do things. We do use new technologies, and we're using newer technologies to try to identify where there may be suspicious activity, where there may be illicit activity happening. I mean, is that a stretch? I mean, is there a parallel there, or am I stretching things?
Yeah, I mean, look, when I was watching this film, and again, it was yesterday, so it's like very fresh in my mind. The precogs, these humans in the water, are really AI, right? They are essentially a database that is being used to predict crimes before they occur. And all of the issues raised in the movie, interesting enough, or many of them were raised in the hearing that I was in before House Judiciary a week or so ago. I literally sat next to a gentleman who did a great job from the ACLU, talking about some of the concerns around predictive policing, as it has been called. I think of the use of AI and how we think of it as TRM very, very differently than this idea of sort of predictive policing. For me, it's how, and this goes actually to Joe's question in the chat right now, and it's we need to move as quickly as the criminals are moving today. And, look, we're good at you can trace out one blockchain transaction or follow the funds. But what we really need to do is we need to supercharge this to build out networks, to understand, to Andrew's question, also in the chat, we need to use AI to build out scam networks in Southeast Asia. We need to understand all of the on-chain and off-chain connections between these groups. We need to know, hey, not just, hey, this wallet sent a transaction to that wallet, but we need to know the connectivity between thousands or even millions of wallet addresses that are being used to commit these types of crimes by building out those networks. And what AI allows us to do is ingest data much more quickly, to understand data insights much more quickly, and to build out those networks. So I think of it less around predictive crime and more around how can we supercharge the building out of networks in order to disrupt them. And just like one more point, because I think Andrew's question around basically he says the main threat is coming from scam farms in Southeast Asia, leveraging AI and good OSINT. How do we combat that when the host nations are not cooperative? I think it's in some parts, it's ensuring that the host nations get more cooperative. And that's why it's really important to use diplomatic tools. It's important to use sanctions. It's important to really exert as much pressure as we can, way beyond sort of any of the blockchain tracing tools that we talk about or the AI tools. It's to leverage, to leverage those types of relationships, to use really every tool in the national security toolbox to go after these guys. But scammers themselves, we need to use AI to build out the networks to really go after them. So that's what I see when I look at those precogs sitting there in the water. I think to myself, what they're really allowing us to do is to generate all the data that we possibly can as fast as we can to build out those networks and to go after bad actors, to supercharge defensive operations.
Yeah, and to Andrew's question, I mean, one thing I'll say is, and you touched on it, which is there's the off-chain component to this. For those operations that are going through Southeast Asia, which maybe they begin with crypto here on this side, and then they make their way to Southeast Asia. Oftentimes, those are going to over-the-counter markets, to OTC markets, right? It's not a dead trail. It's not that it goes dark. It's that you have a situation, and those who've been following financial crime for a while, I'll say one word. Remember hawalas. I mean, they still exist, but remember the issue around hawalas right after 9/11. There was so much focus because this was an informal sector where there was legitimate activity, but then there was illicit activity going through hawaladars, and there was a crackdown. Right, we had to formalize these markets. The OTC markets that are in these jurisdictions, which are poorly policed, weak enforcement, weak compliance, there's a law enforcement solution there, and maybe it means that there's pressure, that there's collaboration with our law enforcement and with local law enforcement, right? I mean, there's only so much that sort of FATF can do, but there has to be collaboration just on the working law enforcement level. So that's one issue there. But the other thing I want to bring up, and we got to get to this before we run out of time, because fresh off the press, or at least last week, the White House released its AI plan. It's the White House AI directive or AI plan. I forget the exact wording. Talk about supercharge, right? It's clear. So what's in that plan? And I think you were actually on LinkedIn recently where you compared what the US is doing with what China is doing. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, it's really, really, really interesting. I mean, literally last week, both the US and China released sweeping national plans for AI. And what's so interesting and not shocking, right, is that they both outline blueprints. They both for leadership, but the approaches are very, very different. China's plan is very centralized. They talk about wanting to be the global leader in AI by 2030. They talk about by the end of 2025, they want to target 3 to 5 foundational models, 100 plus industry specific models, and widespread real world deployment. But this is all a top down approach where the US, again, not surprisingly, is very market driven, deregulation focused, focuses on competition. Really, this whole idea is how do we accelerate AI growth, build infrastructure, and then lead from an international perspective. It's the US is all about, hey, how can we leverage the private sector in this space? And China is very much about, hey, how can the government from a top-down approach?
Yeah.
But they really want to end up in the same place, and that is the global leader in AI. Not a ton on there about the stuff that we're talking about, AI crime, and how to combat it. But I think that the reality is that that we need to be a leader in this, and that starts with ensuring that innovation is occurring here in the U.S. in a safe and responsible way. Moira mentioned in terms of Minority Report, like this idea of tampering with the precogs, which becomes really the genesis of the big part of the movie, which makes it so interesting. And she uses sort of tampering with the blockchain potentially as an example. I think that's one example. I think where my co-panelist on the hearing from the ACLU would say something around like, yeah, but it's also AI is only as good today as what you're putting into it in terms of prompts. If we're putting in biased information, we're going to get ultimately biased information out, which I think is a pretty decent analogy too. And that's why, look, there's no one who's more forward leaning on the use of AI from a law enforcement and national security perspective than I am. But we also need to put appropriate guardrails on it to ensure that we don't have those types of issues. But again, when I think of it, I think of less about predictive policing and more about how can we use it to build out these networks who talked about it a second ago here. It was Andrew talks about WeOne and the Cambodian regime. WeOne's actually a great example where OFAC and DOJ leveraged some, blockchain analytics, which rely heavily on machine learning algorithms and AI to build out a network of how WeOne was facilitating money laundering associated with these types of scam activities. So actually a really good example of the U.S. sort of using that whole of government approach, sanctions, criminal, national security, and using technology to build out the networks.
Yeah. And it all goes back to the question of data, which you brought up. And I think Mayara's point is similar, right? If the data is tampered with, then that's going to impact the use of these tools. China is focused on building a data-driven society, economy, an environment where the data is collected by the state, the data that is emitted through apps, through businesses, that is to be made use of. And so, there's a clear vision about how data is to serve the interests of the state. Obviously, here in the United States, we have a very different orientation, still an interest in wanting to use data. But I think these issues, the issue of AI is probably making policymakers think more about how do we handle data? How should it be preserved, made secure, and privacy, right? I mean, the thing about Minority Report, I mean, it's just great the way Spielberg did this, and he does this with all his films, right? He's so insightful. But I mean, he uses the perfect situation, which is, and this is not, the movie's been out for 20 plus years, so I guess I can spoil
Spoilers are fine.
It's for Minority Report.
Maybe less so.
Yeah. I mean, what is the first takedown? The first takedown is a man whose wife is having an affair. So the precogs see this, and that, so it's getting into issues around what does the government see? What is available to be seen? And so I think also in the chat, Miranda.
Exactly. This is so perfect for her question. You're literally getting into exactly what she asks here.
But go ahead. So I mean, oh gosh, we don't have enough time. I think we only have 22 minutes or so. So we don't have enough time to really.
No, I love Miranda, and I think the point you're getting to is really just like it's always been really fundamental in the way that at TRM, the way we think about these things and the way I've thought about them is that really I'm asked all the time is how do we ensure that lawful users of technology can engage in a private and secure manner while at the same time stopping criminals from taking advantage of privacy protocols, of mixers, of privacy enhanced cryptocurrencies. And I think her question is perfect. In fact, again, no spoilers, but I recorded a TRM Talks this week with the co-founder and CEO of Predicate, which is working with TRM to think about a lot of as a partner, to think about a lot of these issues. And it's what that really is. It's leveraging technology. And her question is awesome because it's exactly the types of things we're thinking about. It's using zero knowledge proofs. It's trying to build compliance into the protocol in order to really leverage the technology to ensure that lawful users have the privacy that they need in an open financial system, while at the same time stopping bad actors. So my answer is almost always there is a technology solution to a lot of these issues that we're seeing today.
And, I would say to Miranda's question, comment about, is there a way to have a more sort of decentralized and secure compliance infrastructure? And I think she's pointing to, privacy preserving and compliance. I would say it's not that is there a role or is there a way? I think it's the only way, at least here in the United States, because, I've done some work over the past few years. A lot of my research on the think tank side has been about some of the infrastructure projects, the digital infrastructure projects that we do see happening in China. And it actually brought me to the conclusion, because there's blockchain infrastructure that's being built out that is not going to be that will be more controlled, where there are questions about how secure the data is. I actually, here's an analogy. I don't know. I'm going to go out on a limb to make this analogy, and maybe it doesn't fit, but I think there's a world where we may look back and we may say, back in 200 years ago, 100 plus 200 years ago, 100 years ago, the commodity that was important for your geopolitical strategic positioning was gold, right? In terms of your economy, your sort of leverage, your ability to have for your military was gold, right? Everything was based on gold. And then we've moved into the past 70 plus years where the US has ascended and the access to the dollar has been much more important. It was gold as well, but then for the past several decades, it's been access to the US dollar. So a lot of these issues we think about currency, right? What does digital currency mean for the dollar? I actually think we're heading to an era where the commodity that is going to be critical will be data. Because that's why there's this AI race. It's who is going to have who's going to be able to leverage data in the most strategic way. AI is just an outgrowth or a part of that. So maybe I'll just pause there.
Honestly, that's an awesome hot take. And I will tell you that I have done a lot of webinars. I've had a lot of conversations. I'm not sure I've ever seen questions as good as the ones in this chat today. I would just say, Miranda, kind of putting a point on it, I can't believe that we're releasing this TRM Talks this week with Nikhil Raghavera from Predicate. Definitely give that a listen. I think it hits on a lot of the issues that you're focused on. But yes, I absolutely think that building compliance into the protocol, I think there's a huge role here for DeFi, for folks who are building compliance as critical infrastructure there, that we're really going to be able to leverage the technology to include zero knowledge proofs, to include digital identity. There's so many interesting issues. To Danielle's question.
Yeah, how far out? Danielle's bringing Danielle wants to know, okay, when is this going to happen?
I love Danielle's question. And Danielle's been thinking about these issues as long as anyone on the Hill, and always wanting to support that work. I think the reality, and this is what I said to Congress last week, said to House Judiciary, I think the reality is today, really, like I said, only a handful of U.S. law enforcement, national security officials have the technology and the expertise that they need to handle this. And while this group is really, really solid, and I'm talking, across the FBI and IRSCI and DEA and Secret Service, and then the national security community are really, really power users of blockchain intelligence. They're understanding how to use AI tools. They're only a handful of those folks. And really what we need is every law enforcement agent, every national security official to have access to tools, but also the training that they need. I mean, we're moving rapidly into a world where wars and crime happens on blockchains and across cyberspace, as opposed to city streets and war zones. And we need to build that next generation. So I'd say, like, when I'm thinking about, when I was literally asked this question a number of times last week or the week before in Congress, and my answer has got to be at least start with tools and training. And then I think it's to a question earlier around a whole of government approach. We need to ensure that Treasury and DOJ and Commerce and the national security agencies, the National Security Council essentially, is really aligned to use every tool in the toolbox. But it's really got to be an upgrade in our law enforcement, national security infrastructure, leveraging AI tools at scale.
And if I'll say something to Danielle's question, because I won't. It's not a chicken and an egg approach, because that makes it sound like there's no solution. What I'll say is that I think there's a lot of projects out there that are ready to deploy, that are doing small things, right? They're deploying. I mean, I'm not going to speak to what your conversation with TRM Lab. I mean, with Predicate. I'm sure that they'll talk. Nikhil's going to talk a lot about what they're doing with Predicate. But one of the considerations I think a lot of these projects have is sometimes it's not the software provider itself; it's that institutions want to be able to use these more innovative compliance solutions. They want to build this infrastructure. It's probably ready to deploy, but they want to make sure that it's not considered high risk to use these, that this alternative, because this is new.
It's
right?
such an important point. And it's interesting when we talk to we work with pretty much every large cryptocurrency exchange, broker, custodian, right? And they're all deploying, or I say a lot of them, the more forward-leaning compliance teams, and this goes to Moyara's question too, are using AI today as part of their compliance stack, right? They're using tools that have AI, they're using AI tools. And like always, crypto is, you have new, compliance professionals, you have folks who are a little bit more forward-leaning. When I talk to traditional financial institutions, it's a very different conversation. It's like, hey, we want to really ensure that our regulators are on board with this before we start deploying these types of tools, which could potentially set you behind when it comes to bad actors who are already leveraging them. So I think the more guidance we can get from financial regulators in particular on, hey, you should be, whether it's FinCEN or someone else, maybe FinCEN's the right place for this, is, hey, not only should you be using these tools, but it's like an expectation today that along with blockchain intelligence, you're using AI native tools in order to move fast as the bad guys. And yes, that is exactly how you spell Predicate. But just check out like LinkedIn or X today. We already dropped a social clip in there, and we're excited to kick it off on Wednesday.
Yeah, and it's so great because we have all this robust discussion in the chat. I didn't even say we're open to Q&A, so we're open to Q&A. And
literally, like, it is on fire over there. This is the best chat I've ever seen on one.
So everything is open now. I mean, I know everyone's already asking questions, but if you have a biting question, feel free to drop it in, and we'll address, and we'll put your question up on the screen. And this is for anyone who's not seen the chat. This is being recorded, and this will be available. So in the chat, you could actually see a link. Go to illicitedge.com. Go to that chat right there. You can follow up on the YouTube stream, and this will be up there.
And fun fact, one of my favorite things from watching this movie last night, and it's something I did not remember, is there's this amazing scene towards the end where Tom Cruise is wearing a hoodie.
Oh, yeah.
It's the very last scene of the movie. And he's about to confront the villain, and he pulls off his hood.
Oh, do we have that?
And he's bald. Oh, and he's bald Tom Cruise. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so great. I'm so excited for this.
Is it bald Tom Cruise, or is it Ari Tom Cruise? Is it?
I just couldn't believe that I could actually ever look possibly in any way like Tom Cruise. But when he did that haircut, I was like, wow, there's a moment where we might be able to pull this off. It was a fleeting moment, as my wife would tell you, but it was a moment nonetheless. But anyway, so so this is definitely, I'm in full bald Tom Cruise move today from Minority Report.
No, it's great. It's absolutely great. So here's a thought. Here's a question that I think we have a question that we're going to put out. Oh, what are ways that blockchain tech can fit into the global AI race?
Yeah, no,
go ahead. I have some thoughts, but go ahead.
Yeah, it's a really important question, and really, it's interesting when President Trump appointed a czar for technology. It was crypto and AI, and I think it's because we're really talking about emerging transformative technology in both fronts. But there's a lot of overlap between the two, and I was asked this question explicitly by a member of Congress a week or so ago, and the question was essentially the one in the chat, and that is like, can you talk about blockchain or crypto and AI? And really, in a lot of the crime typologies that we're talking about today, whether it's fraud, deep fakes, whether it's ransomware, whether it's cyber attacks, crypto is often the means of value transfer. That's it, right? But it's significant because crypto enables us to move larger amounts of funds faster than ever before. So when we're seeing ransomware attacks supercharged, crypto is usually the means of value transfer in a ransomware attack. Or when we're seeing a scam, pig butchering cases, investment fraud, crypto is often the thing that people are stealing, people are trying to scam victims out of. So what we have to do when we're building blockchain intelligence tools at TRM is we build AI into really every layer of our platform in order to ensure that we're moving as fast as the bad actors, right? If bad actors can spin up hundreds, thousands, millions of crypto addresses at the click of a button, we need to be able to auto trace those thousands or millions of addresses at the click of the button. And that's what we're able to enable for our law enforcement clients and others today. So
Yeah.
I would say that basically it's absolutely critical because, look, every crime is a financial crime. And what we need to be able to do is supercharge the following of the money, right? That's all this comes down to at the end of the day is how do we follow the money? And the way we follow the money today is more and more on blockchains. And we need to use AI to move faster because criminals are now moving faster using AI.
Mm-hmm. And I agree, right? So there's the counter illicit finance part of things. There's that, but there's also the issue of the race for AI, the race for leveraging data, and what's the best way to handle that data. So there's something out there there's a developing sector called decentralized AI. So AI models, right? These are data models, and the data has to be housed, and there has to be a way to generate even to generate the computing power. There are multiple projects happening now where that computing power is decentralized, so you can tap into a more efficient means for training AI models and for deploying AI. That's I would say somewhat frontier, but a lot of people, I think even in the national security space, are thinking about that. They're thinking about, well, how do we use decentralized tech, decentralized technology, decentralized approaches for this technological innovation. That's where the crypto space, I think, has a really important part to play. You might not hear about it that much, but it's definitely on the horizon. So there's decentralized physical infrastructure networks. A lot of those projects are doing that. So there's a huge component for software developers to use the blockchain as part of the global AI race.
Point.
So let's AI in general. I know a question that comes up in my circles sometimes is, so how should people be integrating it? I mean, and how should they be getting smart on AI? I mean, how have you gotten more proficient? Like, what are practical things to do?
Yeah, no, it's an awesome question. And like everything else, I always go back to exploring the technology. When I left the government after 15 years and joined a firm in the crypto space, TRM, I spun up a MetaMask wallet and I minted an NFT. I bought Bitcoin, right? I messed around with the tech to try to understand it. I think it's the same way with AI. I think people may have seen, I've been doing these videos every once in a while called like AI Ari, where I put up a video on LinkedIn that is not me, but I've used a avatar of me to create this conversation. And it's really playing with the tech. It's using the tools that are out there today to create deep fakes. There was some that are circulating with me with like a rifle and me in jail, and it's all really trying to mess around and understand the technology. So I'd say hands-on is really such an important way, and this was true when I got into crypto. This is true now in this AI space. It's you have to explore the technology, and I think that's one of the frustrating things over the years about some of the U.S. government policies where U.S. government employees can't own or hold cryptocurrency. Essentially means that you're not really able to play with it in the way that I think really is deep understanding. The other thing I'll say, and this is like maybe less an AI thing, but I think it's more and more, is look what the regulators are saying, and really trying to understand where they're coming from. And this has definitely been something I've focused on in crypto for a really long time. It's like, go to the source, right? FinCEN is regularly putting out enforcement actions, which usually come before guidance, and is a really good way to say, hey, they're usually sending a message to the industry saying, hey, these are the things you should do. These are the things you should not do. And so I always think going to that source is a really great way. But first and foremost, play with the tech and really understand sort of what are the regulatory frameworks out there.
Well, we've got that. That's great. We've got a tandem question. So Rob has a question. This is great. Could AI take over the need for compliance personnel at banks who do this job every day? And then Sarah Beth, our friend and our partner here, Sarah Beth.
Yep.
So her question: AI is only as good as the humans that train it, and this applies to the criminal usage as well as the AML sanctions piece. And if I could sort of paraphrase, I mean, she's basically saying we can't discuss AI to follow bad actors if the humans that use it aren't trained well enough. And I love and hypersensitive, hyper suspicious minds make effective AI. That's great. And if I understand, so I mean, we can hit both of those because we don't have much time. But so one, for Rob's question, I don't think AI is going to remove humans from the compliance personnel, and I think that's something that we're talking a lot about, right? Will we have, how many people will we lose jobs? I think the role that AI is, at least in the near future, is it's going to improve and make a lot of things easier, right? It's going to enhance. It's not going to, I mean, because you need to make judgment calls, and plus whatever AI does, right, needs to be vetted. So I wouldn't say, I would say no, it's not going to replace compliance personnel. But then Sarah Beth's point about if you don't have proper training and if you don't have the right mindset, I know Sarah Beth talks a lot about the sort of the mindset if you're a compliance professional, where you don't ignore things, you have a certain judgment. That's essential to being able to leverage these types of tools, whether it's an AI tool or some other compliance tool, right? So Ari, I don't know if you want to say something.
No, I love it.
I mean,
I just like Sarah Beth, like diving in here. It's like we have some of the greatest minds in compliance just on this chat right now. So like, thank you, Sarah Beth, for jumping in here. I think that, to Rob's question real quick, I think the answer is it's always going to be a mix of really great people and really great technology. And I don't mean to do all these shameless plugs, but our last TRM talks was with the really excellent chief compliance officer from Kraken, CJ Rinaldi. And I asked him, what is the secret to having a really great compliance function at a crypto business? And he said, it's like, it starts with the team of the very best people. He name dropped Crystal Noe, who leads their sanctions work. But then we talked AI in that conversation too, but then it's ensuring that you have the tooling, whether it's blockchain intelligence, whether it's AI tools, to really, really build, to give those people the power that they need to really stop bad actors from engaging with those platforms. So Rob, I think my view is it's like always going to be great teams plus great tech. And Sarah Beth, like, of course, that's the whole deal. Like, we have to go after bad actors. And I don't see AI necessarily as, I see AI as basically being able to allow compliance professionals to move as fast as the bad guys are moving out there. So it's essentially fighting AI with AI. And yeah, absolutely. The bad actors are, the AI is only as powerful as the bad actors, I guess, until I think arguably it could become more powerful than the bad actors by becoming autonomous, by building on itself. We're not quite there yet, but I think we're probably heading in that direction pretty quickly.
Yeah. And Miranda chimed in again. What role could ZKP-based compliance infrastructure play in augmenting predicates?
Miranda, listen to the TRM talks.
Coming up.
Listen to the TRM talks. But also, I will say, like, it's a great question. And, I've for years, it's funny, like, from when we started doing TRM talks almost 5 years ago, one of the most interesting questions to me is like this question of privacy versus security. And we had a DeFi roundtable. We did a conversation with a senior Treasury official after the DeFi risk assessment. I still believe that zero knowledge proofs, digital ID, really leveraging technology at the protocol is the future of this. But definitely give the episode this week a listen.
Yeah. Great point. Great point to end on.
Oh
'Cause
my
we're all,
gosh, I can't believe this thing is
went by.
over.
Yeah.
I feel like, there's the thing about Minority Report is you're always a race against time. Like it's that clicking, you're wearing the watch,
Tick,
the
tick, tick, tick.
clicking time. I feel like
So
this was totally that. Yeah.
I want to put in the chat, what should I do next? What
Yes, I love
movie?
it.
But if anyone has suggestions, I mean, there's
Other
War
than War
Games.
Games. We already
I
heard
mean,
War
we
Games.
already
That's a
got
good
War
one. What
Games.
else? Yeah.
What are we missing? Because again, sometimes art, sometimes life imitates art. But this has been great. Ari, I want to thank you. I want to thank TRM Labs, the whole Illicit Edge team for putting this together. We have had a great conversation, and we hope this will live on in YouTube and be useful. Spread it far and wide. Sign up to Illicit Edge. Any other last words, Ari?
Run. Right?
All right. Everybody runs. All right.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. And thanks for having me. I love the conversation.
Yeah. Thank you, Ari. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are. This is the Illicit Edge Media Network. Signing off.